Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Unexpected Entrepreneur Podcast. Today, we are back with a guest episode. I have Hanna here from Boundless Copy, and we're going to be talking all about brand voice, which, if you know anything about us, we love anything that has to do with branding, and brand voice is so important. And I'm super excited to talk about this. But before we jump in, do you want to introduce yourself and let everybody know who you are, what you do, all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Jessie, thank you for having me on. My name is Hannah. I run the copywriting agency Boundless Copy. I am the founder and head copy gal. What we do there is we help business owners who are small businesses, medium-sized businesses, solopreneurs, not just find their brand voice, but write words that help them resonate with their dream people. And I've been doing this for about 8 years, and it's probably the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. I have a background in journalism, very big, like interviewing style kind of person, but I have gotten such a kick out of working with business owners the past 8 years. And we really specialize in brand voice and helping everybody figure out what it is about their voice that makes them so special and what's going to signal to their dream people that they're for them.
Exactly. And that's what we want. We want to have those dream people come to us and know that we're the right pick right off the bat. So I love that. So before we jump into brand voice and all of how to actually figure out your brand voice, making sure that it connects to your clients, everything like that, can you start off by explaining what exactly brand voice is if someone doesn't know what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. And I could talk about this all day, so you might have to reel me in. But when we think about like copy or the words that we put out there for our people to read, so our websites, our emails, our Instagram captions, anything where words are, our brand voice is how we communicate what we want to say. So people talk a lot about messaging, they talk a lot about positioning, and they talk a lot about sales psychology when it comes to
Mhm.
copy. All of those things are super important too. Messaging is kind of the what we want to convey to people, like what we need to say, what we need our audience to hear. Positioning is how we communicate what makes us different and like for who we're for. And then sales psych is kind of what delights and excites people's brains. Brand voice is how we communicate all of those things. So it's our personality, our vibe, our style. It's what makes people remember us when we're talking to them, essentially. And I always tell my clients, my students, anybody who's talking to me about brand voice, anybody who will listen, truly, I think it's awesome that we put so much time into our messaging and our positioning and our sales psych. You have to have that for great words, great copy. But if you put all of that work into it, you've like got this killer messaging strategy, and then you're not communicating that in a way that's
Mhm.
memorable or makes you stand out or keeps you top of mind. It's kind of like all that work. What did it get you? Like, what do you do? What are we doing? So, brand voice is that how it's how we communicate, how we stand out, what makes us so different.
I totally agree. And I think there's always this kind of disconnect of like, we think about them as individual, aspects of our
Mhm.
brand, but realistically, they all have to play together to create our like holistic brand that we're presenting to the world. And if you take one, it like can sort of work on it on its own, but it's not
Mhm.
really going to do what you want it to do unless you have all of them kind of working and like playing together. So I
Absolutely.
I love that. I think brand voice is huge, especially when we're talking like we work with a lot of photographers who are with people, on some of the biggest days of their life. And if
Mhm.
your brand voice doesn't really represent your personality and who you are and who they're going to be interacting with in real life, like that could be a big, oh my God moment for someone who's like, I thought
Yeah.
I was getting a completely different person. And now
Yes.
this person showed up. Like, this is a little, I don't know how I feel about this.
I hear you. I work with elopement photographers, wedding photographers a lot, and that's such a unique space because there are so many talented people in that industry. Especially, I primarily work with elopement photographers, and they that space is saturated, which is very cool because wow, there's so many talented photographers. But it gets harder and harder to stand out. It gets
Hmm.
harder and harder to find the dream people that you're actually looking for. So when you get really clear on what your brand voice is and then you get really sticky with it, that's when your dream people find you. And that's when people are like kind of scanning the room of all those elopement photographers and they could hear your voice and they're like, that's the one. That's who I'm here for. So I love working with elopement photographers because it's such an interesting industry. Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit of actually starting the journey of finding what your brand voice is. If people are maybe doing it
Mhm.
on their own, maybe even working with a copywriter, what are kind of the first things that you can kind of look at or look at within your business, your personality, that can kind of give you an insight into what your brand voice might be?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I work with anyone, before we get into any part of developing a brand voice, there's a couple of things that I make sure we know right off the bat. And number one is that brand voice is not this like archetype or this character that you're tapping into. Brand voice is the boundless definition of brand voice is that it's this beautiful fusion of who you already are and who your dream people need you to be. And it's interesting because in the world of copy, in the world of like writing words, there are these very polarizing camps where it's like, okay, your brand voice is who you are, and anybody who doesn't like it can deal. Or your brand voice is exactly who your dream people need you to be, even if that's not you. And then you're kind of playing a character.
Mhm.
The thing about brand voice is you need it to be consistent, you need it to be easy to tap into anytime you're writing. That's where that fusion comes in because we're taking a look at who you already are and then we're refreshing and refining it so that it's who your dream people need you to be. It's all about, it all lives in that overlap, which is always a really interesting conversation. And then I also always like to tell people, like, we're not creating a brand voice from
Mhm.
scratch. We're not just like trying to like piece things together and be like, this is who you are. Like, we are always discovering, we're going digging for it, and then we're bringing it to the surface. So if I'm advising someone how to start that process, number one, start thinking about who you already are. What does your voice sound like? If someone was going to describe what your personality was, how you talked to them, how they made you feel, or how you made them feel, how would they describe that? And then do a little of that like foundational work about your dream people too. Who do they need you to be in your space? What are they looking for in someone like you? And kind of try to find where that overlap is. That's going to be a really great start in figuring out what that voice sounds like.
And I think that kind of figuring out a way to, really tap into who you are and showing up, I know authentically is kind of thrown around a lot, but like showing up
Mm-hmm.
as yourself is so important because if we're looking at, the longevity of our business, if we're constantly having to show up as a character or as someone that we're not, like
Yes.
that is going to get so tiring after, X, it might be months, it might be years, like it's going to change person to person. But if you're able to show up as yourself and that's what people expect, that's what people want, that's what people are looking for, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to make just being in your business so much easier.
I always tell people too. I know that the phrase that get like tossed around all the time is people buy from people,
Mhm.
and I hear that. That's totally true because that's what we're looking for as people. We want that connection. But I actually think it's a step further. I think people buy from people they like and they trust and they connect with and they vibe with and they want to get a beer with or want to ally with on Survivor, like people that are really their people. And your brand voice is that signal to them. It's that like you put that feeler out into the world that's inundated with all of this noise and these voices. And if people hear you and they're like, I like you, I get you, I trust you, that's how we find our dream people.
And I think that's an interesting thing that we've almost seen like a little bit of a shift if we're, say looking in the, wedding photography industry. People aren't just looking for people who take nice photos. Like there are so, like you said, there's so many photographers now. You can, throw a rock and hit a good photographer. That's
Mm-hmm.
only part of it. They want the good photos, but they also want the experience and having someone there who they're comfortable. I mean, you don't want someone in your room getting ready for with you on your wedding day that you're uncomfortable
Absolutely
with.
not. Yeah.
So I think being able to like have that kind of comfort level and connect with your clients and all of that is that like shift that we're seeing that people are
Mm-hmm.
valuing that just as much as how good your photos are, your style, everything
Mm-hmm.
like that.
I totally agree. And like you said, the wedding industry is such a unique place because it's such an intimate thing to hire a wedding photographer. You're
Hmm.
inviting this like professional into your little world, however you're doing it. And they're there when you're getting ready and they're there when you're crying through your vows. You want that person to be someone that you trust and you like and you connect with, and also to be the best person possible to take your photos. So being present in your voice, putting that out there from the beginning is what helps people realize you are the right pick for them. Maybe your dream clients, I'm going to go with an example that makes sense to me. Maybe you're an elopement photographer and your dream clients are people who thought they were going to have a big traditional wedding. but they're shifting into an elopement and they
Mhm.
aren't really sure how to navigate it and they're anxious and they're unsure. Your voice, you should be supportive. You should be, maybe they're looking for a hype person. Maybe they're looking for somebody who's going to be a little bit bolder than they are because they need that out of you. Understanding that, understanding your voice and what they need that voice to be is what helps them find you and what helps you stand out and what makes it so perfect when you're standing there on their wedding day and they're like, yes, you're exactly who I wanted.
And I think when we're looking at it as well, like there is gonna be a market for everyone. Like I think sometimes we're like, oh, I have to like mold myself into this to like fit into what like there are people that want, the super simple photos. There's people who are
Mm-hmm.
going to be really quirky. There's people that are going to be super vibrant. There's people that are going to, be doing live action role play on their wedding day. Like there is a
Yeah.
market for everyone. So you don't have to change who you are, how you talk, how you interact with people to kind of fit into this mold of what you think you should be doing and what other people might
Mm-hmm.
be telling you that you should be doing. Like just showing up as yourself and doing that through like every single part of your brand, how you interact with
Mm-hmm.
people, you're going to get the clients that you want to work with in the first place, not the ones that you're like, well, I guess this is who I'm working with now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as a business owner, if you're a photographer, if you're a copywriter, whatever you do, it's really tempting to kind of look at your industry and be like, what is working? You see what's working for someone else, and to kind of be like, I should maybe mold myself into that. But the reason it works for someone else is because that's probably them. And
Hmm.
so if you like take on their persona, take on their voice, it's not going to work for you because it doesn't feel aligned. It doesn't feel like it's going to line up with your people. The more that you can lean into you, the easier it is for your people to hear you.
So you mentioned earlier kind of having this sticky brand voice. Can you talk a little bit more about that and also generally why, that's important for your brand, your
Mm-hmm.
business, everything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I always, when I'm explaining, well, I say clear and sticky a lot. I want your brand voice to be clear and sticky. And it's, some people have like kind of a visceral reaction to that, which is sort of the point. But people sure as heck remember it, which is also the point. When I am talking to clients or students about brand voice and I need them to understand the importance of it, I always ask them to like envision this super crowded highway. Like it is a super crowded highway. There's cars everywhere, horns honking, dust is flying, and that's kind of the online space. And your dream people are on that highway and they're looking for their exit and they don't really understand how to find it because there's so much happening. There's all these voices, all this stuff. When you have a clear, consistent, bold, sticky brand voice, something they remember, that's that neon welcome sign. You flip it on for them, and suddenly all of that noise cuts out. They see your like welcome, open, vacant neon sign like blasting, and they're like, there you are, because it cuts through all that noise. And when you have a sticky voice, that just means people are remembering the things you say. If you have a sticky voice, they're doing a double take, which is hard to do in the online space when we all sound the same and there's so much happening. Sticky just means that you're saying things your way, you're saying them consistently, and there's something to your voice that's making someone go, wait a second, I'm listening, hold on. And that's what's so important because there's so much happening out there. You need people to hear you and connect with you and remember you.
And I love that you said consistent because I feel like this is something that, sometimes we struggle with, all business owners kind of struggle with, is having that consistency through their
Mm-hmm.
brand voice, through their brand messaging, through their positioning, anything like that. But I think being that kind of like constant, north star almost of like,
Mm-hmm.
this is like who I am, this is what I do, this is how I can help you, here's what you can expect. Like that can be so comforting to people because there's so many unexpected things that happen all the time. And
Yeah,
especially if we're looking at wedding planning, there's so many
totally.
unexpected things that happen over the course of planning a wedding and even on your wedding day, that if you
Mm-hmm.
have someone who's like, no, I'm going to be consistent and I'm like, here, this is what I'm going to do for you. Like that can be so powerful. And I think that too, sometimes it can get confused with people being like, okay, well, that means I have to be this person forever. And like, that doesn't necessarily have to happen. Like things are going to change, your business is
Yeah.
going to evolve, you're going to evolve over the years, who you want to work with might evolve over the years, and like you can shift your brand voice, your messaging, anything like that to kind of stay in alignment with who you are and where you are at that moment. But
Hmm.
having that consistency in those, you know, middle periods is so important.
I totally agree. And I tell everyone that will talk to me about brand voice, yes, you want to be aligned in your voice. And yes, you want to be consistent with your voice, but it's living and breathing. It's
Mhm.
always changing. You're always changing. What you are doing right now, you might not be doing 2 years from now. Maybe your business shifts, maybe parts of you change. It's okay to have this constantly evolving voice, but you do need to start with an understanding of it so that when you do shift, you're aware of it, you understand how you're shifting, and you understand how that changes how you talk to your dream people.
Exactly. And I think when we're looking at kind of all of this with brand voice and how you're speaking to people and you know what you're saying, one of our things that we, you know, love to say is you can have like a great design, you can have a great brand design, you can have a great website, you can get all the people come to your website, but it's what you say and how you're saying it that's going to actually convert them. Like you can have the best looking website in the world,
Yeah.
but if you aren't saying anything, if you're not saying it in the right way, if it sounds like everyone else out there, it's really not going to matter because it's not going to convert in the same way as it would if you are, you know,
Hmm.
being having that kind of sticky brand voice and standing out and being that welcome sign for people as they come in.
Hmm. Absolutely. I totally agree.
So we talked about, you know, kind of using it to stand out a little bit. When we're looking at how to actually use brand voice in general, like what does that actually look like when we're writing copy, when we're doing things like even social media posts or emails or however we're interacting with people? How do we actually take this brand voice and then and like, okay, here's I'm using it now. Here's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's a good question because brand voice is one of those things that's like very conceptual. And you're like, oh, I think I get it. And then you sit down to write something or you bring out your phone to write a caption and you're like, how in the world do I like contextualize this? Like, what is the context? So that's kind of what I've been doing all of this past year. As a copywriter, I've worked with tons of business owners in writing their brand voice and helping them with strategy and helping them with their copy. But what I realized is business owners who maybe don't want to work with a copywriter or who do, but then want to be able to do it on their own, they need to understand the context of brand voice more than just the concept of brand voice.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things that I always tell people is we have all these like templates and guides and messaging strategy, like forms that we fill out. But then when it comes to brand voice, we're just winging it. And like, I'm like, you guys, we need something we can refer to time and time again so that next time you are sitting down, like typing an Instagram caption or updating your website, you have something you can point to and be like, oh, that's how I sound. Oh, these are things I say. And that's a brand voice guide. So the number one thing I always tell people is you need to invest in understanding your voice and then putting it somewhere that you can, it's like your like cheat sheet, your copy and paste, your shortcut. So using a brand voice guide is number one. And I have a whole mini course on that. We can talk about that later. But number two is something that you can start doing right this second without anyone like me, like without having to hire me, anything like that. And that's something called the brand voice dictionary. And I always tell people, like, pull up your phone right now, open a new note, title it like your brand voice dictionary. And I want you to start paying attention to your personality. I want you to start paying attention to how you talk, what you say when you're talking to your best friend, when you're on a call with a client. Just start writing things down without any pressure because this is like a note, like a living, breathing, evolving thing where I want to know what you're saying and how you're saying it. I want to know what you're saying that makes you stand out. And then you can go back through, refine and refresh and start picking out those words and phrases that are going to make people say, now hang on, I'm interested, or I remember you now. And that's kind of what I try to teach everyone to do. I do that in my own. I would show you my brand voice dictionary in my phone. It's like 80 scrolls. But when we start using words and phrases consistently that people remember, that's when people start paying attention to. And it can be for things like when I greet people, I say, hey, pal. And everyone knows me on Instagram or threads because that's how I greet you. Or clear and sticky brand voice is how I talk about your brand voice. And you'll never hear me referring to it in a different way than that. When you're consistent with that kind of stuff, when you're using your voice, that's when your audience starts to recognize you.
I love having that as kind of like you said, that little living, breathing document of like things you
Totally.
say because it is so true. You sit down and you're like, why do I not know how I sound? Like, how do I
Yes.
say, like, how it's my voice. Like, I'm literally talking. How do I not know how I
I
talk?
know. We all have like an identity crisis. You need something you can look at and be like, wait, yes, this is actually me. Hold on.
Like, yes, I've actually said that word before. I could put it in this Instagram caption. But no, I
Yes.
love that, and I think that that's so important for, business owners as we're taking this on ourselves, because a lot of times too, like, we're not necessarily writers. A lot of people who own
Yeah.
businesses are not confident writers, didn't get
Mm-hmm.
into this to start writing, don't love
Mm-mm.
writing. So sometimes it's just that roadblock of sitting down and being like, I don't even know how to write this, but having something there that can be that little starting point, that little just like jump over the start line to be like, you can start here, here's how you can start to do it, can get the ball rolling and help it be
Mm-hmm.
so much more successful than just sitting at a blank page with a little
And
blinking
just
cursor,
staring at
just
it. Yeah.
just writing something to write something.
Yeah, absolutely. No, having something you can lean on, it eventually becomes kind of second nature. But if you, like you said, business owners, we're all expected to just know how to write, and that's not something that we all do well, or not something we're all interested in doing well. But if we have something we can lean on, that we can look at and be like, okay, I know what I want to say, but I don't know how to say it, that's going to help you do that.
I think having that sort of like brand voice guide or the dictionary is super helpful as your business starts to grow and you maybe add team members on or have someone doing your social media or have someone writing
Mm-hmm.
stuff for you, because then you're like, okay, here it is. Here is a physical document where you can look and see how I want to, present myself and my business to the world,
Mm-hmm.
so that you don't have that kind of disconnect as
Mm-hmm.
you start to grow and you're like, okay, my business is getting bigger, but now it's almost not feeling like me and my business anymore.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point too, because yes, your brand voice guide and your dictionary, it works for you, and that's great. And it should work for you. And I love that. But if you're going to expand, and maybe you don't love writing, so you're going to expand and have somebody handle that part for you, but you still want to make sure that this is your brand, this is you, you need to be able to point them to something instead of just being like, oh, I don't know, try to sound like me. Like, you need to be able to give them something that's a guide. And that's how you keep that consistency up.
Absolutely. So if we're looking at the flip side of this and
Mhm.
someone's kind of just starting out, where is a good place for them to start? Like, would you recommend, right as you're starting business, to maybe try working with a copywriter, even if it is just on like messaging and voice to kind of get that down? Or is there a
Mhm.
certain point of like understanding who you are and who you serve before you really get into all of the nitty gritty of brand voice?
Yeah, I think I always tell people, because they're like, okay, when can I start on my brand voice? How far along in business do I need to be? All really good questions. Ultimately, you can start developing your brand voice when you understand who you're trying to serve, who your dream people actually are. And that's all part of developing your brand voice. You have to have an understanding of that. And also kind of what your niche is. I know niche is kind of a dirty word now, but who you're trying to serve and what you're trying to do for them, and where you want to show up in that space. Working on your brand voice, you don't have to be like 10 years into your business. You can be 10 days into your business. It's honestly something I wish people started much sooner, because it's that process that's going to evolve over time. I think getting a clear understanding of who your dream people are and kind of what the foundations of your business are is the first start. But if you have that, start working on it. And yes, hire a copywriter who maybe specializes in brand voice if that's something that's on the table. If it's not at the moment, because I know budget's a thing, there are so many different like templates and courses and resources out there, some that are free, and they can help you start getting a better understanding of that. But uh, for honestly, first thing first, I want you to start that brand voice dictionary, because it's going to be so helpful in just helping you understand language.
No, I think that's amazing advice, and I think it's so important in every aspect of our business to make sure that we're taking a step back and are like, okay, who am I actually doing this for? Why am I doing this? Like, that is
Mm-hmm.
going to inform so much when it comes to like every single aspect of what you're doing in business, how you're doing it, how you're marketing it, who you're marketing it to. And I think that's something that can be really easy to kind of like skip over, and you're just like, oh well, I'm a photographer because I like taking pictures. But like, is that
Right.
really why you're a photographer, or is it because you want the freedom or the flexibility, or whatever it is? And
Mm-hmm.
I think it can be easy to kind of skip over that, especially early on. But it can be, the big difference between having something that really feels like you and aligns with you and connects with you, and having something that's just kind of there and is maybe sort of working sometimes, but like not
Yeah.
really working the way you want it to work.
Yeah, getting a firm footing on your foundation as a brand, as a business owner, as a person, and understanding your people. I always say, like, start there first. You're going to have to get there eventually. And oftentimes, when we put it off, put it off, put it off, it becomes this like grappling battle and it's so much harder. Whereas if we had just done like some introspection right when we started, we could be on the fast track because we'd have such a better understanding. And I think brand voice is a huge part of that too. If you are going to, you're eventually going to have to take the time to understand it. I really encourage you to do it as soon as you can.
Absolutely. And I think having not being afraid of it changing and
Yes.
evolving as you go, because like we said, it's going to change, you're going to change, so many things have changed within Inkpot since it was, I mean, KP started it as a social media marketing company, and
Yeah.
now it's brand and websites and blogging. Like it's a completely different
Mm-hmm.
industry, but it's the being willing to be like, okay, do I like this? Do I like what I'm doing? Do I like who I'm doing it with? And
Mm-hmm.
if the answer to any of those questions are no, like you are in control of changing that, and you can
Absolutely.
change that. You can adjust how you do it. Just don't be, hesitant or afraid to do it. It's going to end up working out better for you in the long run if you feel aligned with what you're doing it, how you're speaking, who you're speaking to, all of that.
Yeah, I could not agree more. The more aligned you are with what you're doing, not the easier it goes, but the more joyful it is, the better the process it is, the easier people are going to find you because they're excited about what you're excited about. It all goes hand in hand.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us.
Yeah,
This was so great. We love talking about anything that has to do with brands, brand voice, brand messaging, everything like that. So, if
no problem.
someone wants to keep in touch with you, connect with you, check out everything that you're doing, where can they find you?
Absolutely. So, Instagram and threads are definitely spots where please let's be friends, let's chat. I am like everybody else, where we're all a little bit unhinged on threads, but it's really fun. That's that. Those usernames are Boundless Copy. I also have my website that's boundlesscopy.com. We have a shop page up, boundlesscopyshop.com currently. But we are primarily kind of pivoting right now, and I'm still serving clients one on one. We're doing a lot of done for you web copy, sales copy, etc. But we're pivoting into this really fun like moment for us where we're doing a lot of education. So we just launched our first round of a mini course called Brand Voice Roundup, and that's actually where you get like 5 video lessons from me where I teach you how to build that brand voice guide that I was talking about. It's like that reliable, reusable brand voice guide. The whole thing's on Notion, and you get Slack support from me and a working call from me too. So we just launched our first round of that in Q3, and we're launching again in Q4, and we're going to do this every quarter. It's super fun. The students who have gone through it right now have told me it's like the best thing they've done for their business since they started. And I like sat here and like cried like a goblin because I was like, no freaking way. So that is starting again in Q4 in October. So waitlist is up. If anyone wants to go there, I'll share the links with Jessie.
That is incredible. We will absolutely link that down in the description, and we highly recommend going and checking everything out that Boundless Copy is doing. But thank you
Thank you.
again for coming on with us today, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.